This is the BMW X1 and this is the BMW iX1. And in this review, we're telling you 10 things that you need to know about them. But before we start, for a great deal on your next car, go to whatcar.com and subscribe to our channel to see lots of other new car reviews. So the BMW X1 first went on sale in 2009 and was a kind of jacked up estate in BMW's lineup. Then a pretty big change for the second generation model in 2015 made it into much more of an SUV. And here we have the latest third generation version, which stays bang on trend as an SUV and adds the fully electric iX1 into the mix as well. If you're looking at the X1, then there are a lot of other really good competitors that it's up against, like the Range Rover Evoque, the Audi Q3, and also the Volvo XC40. And if you're looking at the iX1, then that's also up against an XC40, but obviously the electric version. And it's also got other competitors in the EV world, like the Audi Q4 e-tron and the Tesla Model Y. The new X1 has a number of different changes over the old model, but it doesn't actually look that different from before, so it hasn't been a huge overhaul for the design. You can see it does though have some flush door handles, it's got a new front end, and also the iX1 looks very similar to this, but it's got a slightly different grille. But even though it doesn't look that different, underneath it's on new underpinnings, which you'll also find under the 2 Series Active Tourer, the X2, and also the Mini Countryman. There's a new look in the interior as well, which includes this different layout. So now you've got this kind of floating center armrest here, which gives you a lot of storage underneath it. And there's now 2 cup holders and a spot for your wireless phone charging as well. But the biggest difference is now having this curved screen on top of the dashboard here. So what that gives you is a digital driver display, which is attached to the touchscreen infotainment system. Now the driver display definitely has its strengths because it's really crisp, clear graphics. There's a lot of options for showing different bits of information for you. The only problem is, depending on where you have your steering wheel, you might just find that actually quite a big chunk of the screen is cut off and difficult to see. Now this infotainment system is BMW's latest iDrive 8, which you'll find in many other cars like the i4, the iX, the new 3 Series. And just like in those other cars, there's very good things about it. So it's packed with features, it can get over-the-air software updates, and it's a really responsive touchscreen with really nice graphics. But because it can do so much, there's loads of menus and sub-menus, and it just takes ages to get your head around it. And another slight frustration is the fact that on some of these menus, a lot of the icons are quite small and difficult to hit on the move. But the worst thing of all of it is the fact that on the X1, you don't have a rotary dial to help control the infotainment system. So for many years, BMW's had a fantastic infotainment system, in part because it's so easy to use while you're driving, thanks to that rotary dial. But now with the X1, you don't have that anymore, which is especially strange considering on the iX and on the i4 and on the 3 Series, you still have a physical rotary dial, but you don't on the X1, and it's the same on the 2 Series Active Tourer. So BMW will say that this is a forward step for technology, it's what owners want, but in terms of usability, it can only be a backward step, and that is a shame. But the good thing in here is that the build quality is still what you'd expect from BMW. So it feels really solid, and yes, there are a lot of plastics, but they feel like good quality plastics. And on the main, yes, there are frustrations with the infotainment system and its usability, but it does feel like a premium interior. Now, one of the key strengths of the previous X1 was the practicality that it offered. So particularly in terms of rear seat space, it was very difficult to find a competitor that was better than the old X1. The good news with the new X1 is that it's even bigger. So it's longer, it's taller, it's wider, not by a huge amount, but enough to mean that sat in the back, you can notice that it's even more practical than it was before. So tall adults will be able to fit back here, no problem at all. You can stretch out very easily. There's loads of space under the seat in front for your feet, and it just generally is very comfortable sat back here. And the boot is very good as well. So in total, you get 540 litres of capacity in the boot of the X1, which is quite a lot more than the practical XC40. Another good thing about the boot is that it's a very simple shape. And you get quite a lot of underfloor storage as well. And on top of all that, the rear seats split fold 40-20-40 as standard. So that means each of the 3 rear seats can be folded down individually. At launch in the UK, there will be a choice of 5 X1s. So that's 1 petrol, 2 diesels and 2 plug-in hybrids. And the plug-in hybrids look particularly interesting because they have claimed electric ranges up to 55 miles, which is very impressive indeed. And apparently they take elements of the fully electric iX to make the plug-in hybrid setup of the X1. In the iX1, you have a battery that has a usable capacity of 64.7 kilowatt hours, and that's enough to give it a WLTP claimed electric range around 270 miles, 272 miles, which is pretty good by class standards compared to a Volvo XC40. It's not amazingly remarkable, but it's where it kind of needs to be for this kind of car in the class that it's in. It can accept a maximum charging speed of 130 kilowatts, which again, isn't particularly remarkable, but seems good enough for now, and it's enough to get you 10 to 80% in 29 minutes if you can find a charger that will give you 130 kilowatts. The iX1 has 2 electric motors, so it's all-wheel drive, and it's pretty powerful. So you have 309 brake horsepower, 364 pounds-foot of torque, and it'll do 0 to 62 miles per hour in 5.7 seconds. And it does build speed very impressively, particularly off the line. It gives you that instant hit of torque and acceleration that we're now so used to with electric cars. What else about the car on the road? Well, a few caveats. We're driving in a convoy now because this is actually a late stage prototype of the iX1. So things like the chassis, the steering, they haven't quite had final sign-off. So there are going to be a few changes before the car goes into full production and hits UK roads. But we have had quite a varied route, and it's all quite positive, to be honest. So we know it's quick, it rides fairly well, it's a bit on the firm side, but it still feels comfortable. There's a bit of suspension noise, and it can be a bit prone to thumping over imperfections on the road. But overall, it's still a comfortable electric car. The one disappointment is the steering. Now, of course, this could change by the time the car goes into full production, but it's just light, very light. Even in sport mode, it doesn't really add much weight to it either. It doesn't feel very BMW, to be honest. It still feels reasonably accurate and precise, but it's so light that it almost feels a bit kind of artificial. But as we say, that might change by the time this hits UK roads. What does stand out in the iX1 though is the refinement. So it's nice and calm and quiet. The brake pedal, it's easy to judge the inputs that you need to stop smoothly. The accelerator is very crisp, but still smooth in its response. Now you've got various different drive modes you can put the iX1 in, and you can adjust the regenerative braking as well. If you put it in B mode down on the gear selector here, then that gives it a 1-pedal driving function. So when you lift off the accelerator, the car will eventually slow itself down to a complete stop. You've also got 1 paddle on the steering wheel here, and when you press it, it gives you a boost that increases the power, and it brings up a timer from 10 seconds on the driver display and also on the head-up display. And for those 10 seconds, you just have an extra chunk of power at your disposal to go for an overtake or get up to motorway speeds. And now I'm in a fuel-powered X1. Now, I've driven the 18D, now I'm in the 23i. And the trouble for the X1 on the road is the fact that the Evoque and the XC40, 2 really key rivals, are brilliant, both in terms of ride comfort, they handle pretty well, the refinement's outstanding. So the bar is set very, very high in this class for the X1. And to be honest, compared to those rivals, it feels a little bit ordinary. It's not an uncomfortable car, but the ride is firm. The engine refinement isn't particularly great either. It's especially noticeable in the diesel, which was really clattery, especially on start-up and when you're accelerating hard. And the petrol also sounds a bit gruff, again, when you're accelerating hard. And to be honest, it's only a problem in those circumstances. When you're at a cruise or when you're just going at low speeds around town, you won't notice the engine noise. But ask for a burst of pace and it is noticeable. It's nowhere near as smooth as it is in the Evoque and in the XC40. Again, it's not a bad car to drive, it's just a bit disappointing that it's not better than it is. The best thing about the new X1 and the iX1 is the practicality that it offers. Particularly for the X1 relative to its other rivals, rear seat space is very good, and so's the boot. And the worst thing? Well, it's probably the fairly ordinary driving experience. As we've already pointed out, the Evoque and XC40 really stand out in this class, and it's a shame the X1 doesn't get closer to them in terms of ride comfort and handling. As for the pricing, well, the X1 isn't cheap, but it's priced in line with those rivals. The iX1 looks incredibly expensive, but that's partly due to the fact there's only one powerful four-wheel drive version available at launch. Cheaper variants should arrive in the future to make it look a little more competitive against other EVs. So that's everything you need to know about the X1 and the iX1. For more information and to save some money on both of these new SUVs, head to whatcar.com. And to see lots more new reviews like this, subscribe to our channel.